All set? Okay. Good evening and welcome to this evening's candidate forum. I'm Gina Coppins. I live in Belgrade and am the moderator. We really appreciate everybody coming out and attending either on Zoom or in person. It's really a good way for us to get to know the candidates better. Also, I want to thank the town of Belgrade, especially Lorna and Mary Vogel, who helped facilitate this. Belgrade has a long tradition of sponsoring forums, and I think we're pretty special as a town doing that. This evening, we have a candidate forum for a 2-year term to the State House and the State Senate. We'll start with the candidates for the State House, Sharon Frost and Dan Newman. They're running for State House seat 58. The candidates have been given questions ahead of time that they may be asked during the forum. The audience may also submit questions. Those of you joining remotely may submit questions into the chat feature on Zoom. We ask that you just ask your question, keep your question brief so that we have time for the candidates to answer. We're going to start with each candidate giving an opening statement. And then we'll have the question and answer part of the forum. Candidates will have 1.5 minutes to answer each question. And at the end of the question and answer part, each candidate will give a closing statement. So why don't we start with you, Sharon, if you could give an opening statement.
Sure, be happy to. Well, I'm Sharon Frost. So my background is in education. After college, I went to the Peace Corps and worked in West Africa and Niger, West Africa, doing agroforestry for a little over 2 years. And when I came back, I was accepted into the Peace Corps Fellows Program to get a master's in teaching English to speakers of other languages, which I used to teach around in New York City and Boston area. And then I got married and started having children, and it became really difficult to juggle teaching with, having kids. So I was lucky enough to be a stay-at-home mom and take care of the house and the gardens and be able to volunteer in the schools with the girls. And they did go through the whole Messalonsky system. For the most part, we had one daughter who went up to Limestone, but anyway, it enabled me to have my finger on the pulse in all their classrooms and schools, and volunteering has been super for me. And now I am on the school board. And I guess that's it.
Okay, thank you. Dan?
Dan Newman. A lot of people around town know me. I have been on the select board for on and off, because it was a stint that I wasn't on, approximately 18 years. I've been on a budget committee. I've been on the fire department probably 27 years. My background is fire protection, and so I serve on criminal justice public safety right now at the State House. I've prided myself on being bipartisan, and the same way I worked with the select board, that I try to listen to everybody's opinions, backgrounds, what they really want, what's important to them. I'm one of only 5 Republicans that was endorsed by the Wabanaki Alliance this year, because of listening to the Indigenous Maine Indians concerns and legislation that they proposed around the state. I've got 2 daughters. They both went through Messalonsky, both are nurses, and both of them live within 1,000 yards of me, and 5 grandkids. So just a little bit about me.
Great, thank you. Okay, so Dan, let's start with you. What would you like to work on as a legislator? What issues are near and dear to your heart? And as a legislator, would you work on or sponsor legislation regarding those issues?
Well, basically, like I said, for the last 4 years, I've been sitting on criminal justice and public safety. So my background is public safety. So I bring the fire end versus the police end to that. I have been working hard to balance the strengthening the laws versus, and also trying to figure out a balance between that and reform for drug reform and drug can't talk tonight, rehabilitation. Because we have seen so many overdose in the state of Maine. That's one of my main concerns. I have proposed strengthening penalties for fentanyl trafficking. And I will continue to propose that. That was shot down. They didn't want to increase any penalties the last legislative session. But I also tend to encourage other members of my party on environmental concerns, since we do have the lakes out here. It's one of the biggest concerns in our district is all the tourists around the tourism around the lakes and the amount of money that comes in from it.
Thank you. Sharon, do you want me to read the question again, or?
I think I've got it.
Okay,
So for me, my background is, you know, conserving the environment, and I care very deeply about that. I hope to be selected to, be on the Environment and Natural Resources Committee. And I think that, you know, it comes down to what's most important for our community, and, you know, bar none, I think that, I think that the environment is important for really everybody, but we have to work very hard to protect what we have, our lakes and our forests. You know, like Dan said, we have the tourists in, they bring a lot of revenue to the area. And and to do that, we have to be present for, you know, the voting. We have to be listening to the scientists. Who are on top of the invasive aquatics. We sat at the Belgrade Lakes Association meeting and heard about how the waters are warming. And this all is, you know, the scientists are on top of it, and we have to back legislation that supports taking care of these lakes.
okay. Well, I'm keeping with that topic. Maine faced some damaging effects of 3 back-to-back storms last winter. What should Maine be doing, if anything, to address climate change and mitigate the damage caused by storms such as these? Sharon, you have any?
Yeah, well, I mean, it is tough. I mean, the storms are happening. There's not a lot at this point, except to like take a stand and work on, you know, erosion control, I would say. You know, banking up more forests, keeping the land more in place. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's, I guess that's all I can think of at the moment.
Okay. Dan?
Well, obviously, storms we had were devastating. We can't control the weather. We all believe in some form of climate change. We can see it. It's happening. What we all need to do is we need to work together to reduce the pollution. And we need to remember that we're not the only country. You know, I mean, right now, Maine and the United States has some fairly strict environmental laws, but there's a lot of other countries that don't. So we've got to push more for other countries to come in line. We also need to push technologies or use technologies that we're ready for. We can't push all electric vehicles right now, like the state's trying to, because Maine doesn't have the infrastructure. I work with CNP and Versan all the time, and they've told me they don't have the capacity for the charging. We need to look at this region. Basically, our geography and our climate would be much better off with hybrid vehicles if we're gonna really get into that versus all electric vehicles. But anything we can do will help. Again, we work hard in this district to protect our lakes from runoff and the environmental hazards. We have to, so we rely on it for our livings.
Thank you. This is a question about the housing crisis. What are some of the things Maine could do, if anything, to help ease the housing crisis and create more affordable housing? Should the problem with the housing shortage be addressed on the state level or on a town by town basis? Dan, we'll start with you.
A lot of the housing shortages in southern Maine. We're not quite as behind the eight ball up here. We just don't have the population. So I think it's gonna have to be a combination of both state and local. The state can try to find ways to streamline the process. Right now, if you go down into southern Maine and want to build a single family house, 25% of the costs are permitting fees. If you want to build a multi-family house, they're talking 40 to 45% cost in permitting fees. And some of these permitting, to get a permit sometimes can drag out almost a year. So we've got to find a way to not only streamline that and be able to keep some of our environmental priorities intact, but we have to find a way to make that amount shorter and reduce the cost to do it. You know, we also, not only that for housing, I mean, just keeping people in their existing houses. We've got a lot of elderly residents that can't afford their property taxes anymore. I mean, we had the tax stabilization fund that lasted a year and it was repealed. It was pushed by our opposing party because they wanted to spend the money on other things that they thought were prioritized higher. But people just want to stay in the house they grew up with and their families.
Okay. This is a question that was submitted by someone from Zoom. What do you plan to do to address the rise in property taxes across the state? Sharon?
So, Dan mentioned tax stabilization. You know, that was created and, you know, geared towards the elderly, and then they had to, you know, take it away. And I have friends who were ready to put their houses on the market because of it. I think the state really needs to reevaluate. I know they made some concessions for some of the population, but I think the whole thing needs to be reevaluated. And the people that are really suffering and are really close to, you know, losing their homes, we have to take care of them. We're an elderly population. I also just want to comment on the housing. I don't quite agree with Dan in that I think there is a shortage of housing up here. And the problem is that with the limited supply, the prices are too high. And the reason I say that is because I was just in an event for Maine General, and I heard some physicians saying that they had hired wonderful physicians to come in, and they came and they couldn't find a house that suited them or their needs. And so by not having housing, we're losing good doctors, we're losing professors for Colby College, so on and so forth. So I do think that the problem extends to up here, but that we have to do it in a smart manner that doesn't conflict with the character of the town.
I'm sorry, I didn't ask you that question. So if you'd like to say more, please go ahead.
Oh, no,
About the housing
that's good now.
crisis.
Yeah, that's good. I just wanted to.
Okay.
I piggyback.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I'm trying to remember who I asked the question to first. Dan, do you have some comments about how to address the rise in property taxes across the state?
Well, I mean, most property taxes are all local. I mean, it starts with the select board and your budget committees in your towns. They try to keep a handle on, you know, where your money's going, what they're spending it on, what services they provide. Unfortunately, in Belgrade, 80% of our property taxes are school budget. So the rising school budget makes a big difference here. The state can get involved by, again, paying out the funds that they promised to reimburse towns, to reimburse people that maintain trails. You know, the money that goes back from the state helps. And a lot of times the state kind of steps back and doesn't return the money that was promised over the years, or it's even in statute that they're supposed to.
Okay, well, let's talk about the school budget from the state. Let's see, funding for public schools. Can you comment on the level of funding school districts receive from the state of Maine? Was it enough, not enough? Would you propose any initiatives regarding public schools? Sharon?
Well, I think the major problem Belgrade and Rome have is the cost sharing analysis right now. Everybody's talking about it. It's a real thing. That is one of the things that, you know, if I were in the State House, I would absolutely be investigating. The cost sharing analysis formula was created back when we had more resources, and the towns that sort of made out on that and are making out on it now have grown and have more revenues coming in. And, you know, our town, you know, we still have the lake, but it costs us that much more to keep the lakes clean and to keep our revenues coming in. So the whole, it's the cost sharing analysis right now really is a detriment to a lot of other towns in the whole state. So I think that all needs to be reevaluated. Our superintendent actually has some really good ideas about it, and is willing to share those, and that's something that I think is worth pursuing with the state.
Dan, can you comment on the funding for public schools and whether you have any initiatives regarding public schools that you think the state should address?
Well, up until the end of last session, or end of the first session I was in, the state wasn't living up to their commitment to public schools. We did push hard, and brought the funding back up to over 50%, but it's still not at where it should be under statute. We are still pushing for that. Again, like I'm saying, that, you know, unfortunately, you know, schools are the biggest part of your budgets in your towns. So if we can get the state to step up and look at those formulas, like, because I talked to Sarah a few times on our school board about that. Then we're gonna have to have our property taxes increase in the town. So we've got to find a way to get the state to step up. Teachers actually need to be paid more. I tend to think, and a lot of the higher administrations around the state, they're actually, some of the administrators are overpaid compared to what the teachers and bus drivers and support staff are making. It's just, education isn't my committee. I tend to go to the people who are on those committees and have them come to me and let us know what's going on, and then we discuss it, so.
Thank you. Let's go to the issue of reproductive rights. Would you propose any changes to Maine's reproductive rights laws? And I'm just going to read the description of the Maine law regarding abortion that was on the Attorney General's website. And Maine allows for abortions up to the point of viability. It provides exceptions to the viability restriction to save the life or health of the pregnant woman. So would you propose any changes to this law? Dan, start with you.
I was happy with the way the abortion law was in Maine before they changed it last term. I would prefer to see it go back to at least that. I'm with like 80% of the American public that was polled that believes there needs to be restrictions of some sort. So, am I going to put legislation in? Probably not, because we don't have any. Our party doesn't have any say. We don't control any of the houses or the executive branch. So.
Could you just comment on what was the law before this last legislative session?
I don't know what the law said.
Oh,
Right off
okay.
the top of my head, I know it was more strict.
It was more strict.
Yes,
Okay.
I think
I didn't
there was so many weak.
Okay.
manual
Now
stuff.
it's Now the definition of liability.
Right.
Okay. Sharon?
I'm not interested in changing any laws. I would like to safeguard what we have on the books.
Here's a question from another resident of Belgrade. This resident would like to know, do you vote regularly in elections? And also, what experience and responsibilities have you had with budgets as a board member or as a legislator? Just briefly describe the process you've been involved in for annual budgets. Sharon?
Okay, so I'm a regular voter. I do recall there was one, not the even years election that, I thought I was gonna make it back in time from a kid's event and I didn't. But I'm a mom, I'm a mom, so sometimes these things happen. But, definitely a regular voter. As far as budget goes, as a school board member, I think, people know that the school budget is sort of grassroots where each principal meets with the superintendent, after the principal meets with their staff to try to figure out what they have for budget concerns. The principals then go to the superintendent with their requests, and then a budget is drawn up. And once the superintendent speaks with the human resources and the director of finance, then they come to the board. And we listen and we are, we ask if there's any sort of drastic changes or, things that catch our eye. And, we decide as a board whether or not to agree with what the superintendent has drawn up. That is the extent of what I have done. I have not served on the budget committee. I'll admit that. I am on the educational programming committee because that's my experience. But as a school board member, I am a part of budget discussions. Pretty much every meeting, so.
Thanks, Dan.
I think I voted in every election since I was 18 years old. So, as far as budgets, at the State House, I don't serve on appropriations. Appropriations is the one that deals with the budgeting and everything else. They determine, the governor brings their budget, they determine who gets what, who's asking for what, bring it to us, and then bring it to the caucus, and we talk about it and decide whether we can support it or not. My budget experience is more with the town. I've been on the budget committee in town, I've been on the select board for quite a few years. We have a budget committee that meets with our different departments, with the town manager. They set their proposed budgets, try to tweak it. Budget committee comes to the select board. They bring that budget in and we bring in the department heads and hash over the budget with them, see if what they want is realistic, if it can be afforded, if there's a less expensive way you can accomplish the same thing. We go through the different days of hearings on that, public hearings, and then obviously it goes to town meeting for the town to vote on. In the state, it's, after the appropriation brings it all forward, it goes to each legislative body to vote on.
Are there any questions from the audience? Penny, and it would be to both candidates, okay? The question for both
I
candidates.
don't think you asked for the question on abortion.
Yeah, yes, Penny, I said didn't want to change any laws on the books, and I like to safeguard the laws that are in.
Then my question is, you've been endorsed by Planned Parenthood.
Excuse me, this is a question for both candidates, okay? This would be a question that you would address to both candidates, not just one candidate.
Right, but I'm talking to her right now because she was endorsed by Planned Parenthood. The question's gonna go to both, but my question is, because she was endorsed by Planned Parenthood, in order to get that endorsement, you have to, Planned Parenthood is pushing this LGBTQ stuff that's, I believe, very harmful to our
Excuse me,
kids.
Penny, could you just state your question, okay?
And abortion on demand with no restrictions. So my question is, do you support that? And you would kind of have to answer the questions to be endorsed, and you were endorsed. So my question is, do you agree with that.
Well, first of all, it was definitely endorsed by Planned Parenthood, but you don't have to answer every question. You know, just so you know, particularly the way Planned Parenthood wants you to answer. But in answer to your question, it is, my firm belief is it is a woman's choice to decide what happens to her body based on discussions with her physician. So that's just how I feel. I don't think anybody else should control how a woman chooses to live her life, treat her body, whatever.
What about the LGBTQ?
You know what? So I have never had an experience where I don't want to be a female, but I have seen other people who have struggled with this decision. And it's a firm belief for me that, you know, we have to spread kindness in the world, and their decision doesn't bother us. So it's sort of like live and let live.
Dan, do you wanna?
I'm just trying to figure out
on that?
how,
I don't really know.
I'm trying to figure out how to, I mean, obviously I wasn't endorsed by Planned Parenthood, so, I mean, I'm not a woman, but I don't believe in abortion on demand. I think that was one of the questions, and as far as LGBT, you know, and, men becoming women, women becoming men. I mean, I don't have a problem with anybody's gender or their identity. I don't think it should be pushed on people, because I think that's happening right now a lot. And I think it turned around a few years later going, I wish I hadn't done that from everything I've read and understood. So I think I think we need to take a little bit of a step back and not really push it quite so hard.
Yes. So I have 5 girls who just started kindergarten, so we're not in daycare anymore, but when we moved back to Maine 3 years ago, it was very hard to find quality affordable daycare. And at the same time, we knew that the providers were barely scraping by and they weren't able to pay their staff well enough in order to retain good staff and provide health benefits to them. I have been told by the providers that did provide us daycare that the assistance from the state was very helpful. And I'm curious what you would do to further support daycares in the years to come, since we know those early years are so crucial. And it's crucial to us attracting young families and professionals to the state.
Dan, do you wanna start on this one?
So, I no longer deal with daycare. We've been doing that. My daughters are both up in their 30s. The assistance the state provided is helpful, but sometimes the state drags their feet way too long. I know many daycares that went out of business because they were so far behind in getting the payments from the state, they just couldn't afford to stay in business anymore. As far as the state subsidizing or fund monies for daycares, it's one of those things where I don't know how the state has a certain amount of money. And even this last year, we had record surplus. And that money still was divvied up and went to all the projects, and there still wasn't enough to cover everything that everybody wanted. You know, it didn't send any back to the taxpayers this year. So I'm really not sure what the answer to that is. It's gonna take, you know, whatever committee actually can regulate, maybe the licensing or something, and see what we can do about it, but off the top of my head, I'll tell you.
Karen?
Yeah, I'm always a big proponent of education, and if these early childhood programs need more funding, then I think we need to find the funding, because I think that that's when really the basis of everything kind of begins. So I would absolutely promote that, you know, through the, you know, definitely sponsor funding for those programs.
Okay, Sharon, can start with this one. What should Maine be doing, if anything, to prevent gun violence? In addition, could you comment on your views of whether or not Maine should adopt a red flag law?
Yeah, so I, you know, the Second Amendment is just very, it's, you know, it's something people get very passionate about in this state. And the bottom line is, I really do believe that we have to address the mental health crisis to solve this problem. So, you know, that is one of the things that I really would like to see happen, are more programs, more places, more counseling services, more you know, incentivizing you know, people to go into the field of mental health. I think that sometimes it's just a matter of information sharing. When I was talking to constituents, some of them were talking about the Maranacook High School has a fabulous counseling program for troubled teens, and I haven't had a chance, you know, I learned about it this summer. I haven't had a chance to check it out, but I plan to do that. There's no reason why, if Maranacook's got this program that's working so well, we can't share it with not just our district, but, you know, the rest of the state. So sometimes it's just a matter of sharing ideas, but bottom line is, I think the major problem is mental health, not necessarily dealing with the guns right now.
The red flag law, would give family members, in addition to police, a path toward restricting access to weapons for a person in crisis without a mental health evaluation. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think that probably family has a good grasp on that, so I would, yeah, promote that.
Dan?
I don't know. Well, gun safety, we hear about the gun safety in our committee all the time, so. I believe in responsible gun ownership. But I also believe that our mental health system and our existing laws failed us a year ago. I don't think the police departments and sheriffs were educated correctly on the yellow flag law that we have. I think we had a considerable breakdown between one state, their laws in New York versus ours, what we have in here. I think we need to educate and see right now that they've used the yellow flag law, and I don't have the number in front of me, but I know it's been like 66 or more times since last year's shooting, because they finally figured out how it works. I think we need to let that, see how that works first before we start proposing more laws. So no, I'm not in favor of the red flag law at this time. Again, I do believe in gun safety. I worked hard on the safe homes bill that went through a couple of years ago. And I was proud to be in the conference room with the governor when she signed it into the law, you know, providing incentives for rebates for safes and free trigger guards and things like that. So I believe in responsible gun ownership.
Thank you. One last question. If anybody else in the audience have a question? And
Thank you. I was just curious, that you were a Democrat, until you turned the last day, to an independent, because there was no time to get a Democrat.
excuse
to
me,
run.
Penny,
So-
this is a question that, could you just make sure your question is directed to both candidates, okay?
Right,
Rather than a specific candidate.
so my question is, well, it only applies to one.
This is a forum where both candidates are asked questions. It's not
Okay,
that
so
kind of.
Dan can comment on the question after she does, but my question is, she was a Democrat until the last day.
I'm gonna have to stop you.
Okay,
Please, okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yes,
How can we get in contact with you to discuss such things individually?
I'll give you my flyer after it has my website, email and everything.
And the thing for you, Dan, I've been interested in talking to you about some issues, but I haven't really known,
Mhm.
especially about issues that I know we might disagree on.
Mhm.
How to sit down and have that conversation with you.
I've got a business card, I've got my state card, it has my cell phone number, I don't.
So we can have a few minutes after the form's over, you can exchange information. Okay, one last question before your closing statements. What is your opinion on the proposed new state flag? Sharon?
You're talking about the
The
pine-
ballot question, it's about the new
Oh.
proposed state flag.
yes.
Pride treaty with-
Yes, the one you see everywhere. Yes, I love it. I think it has a name, that's why it was confused, right?
Does it have a name? I don't know.
I believe it does, yeah, so
Okay.
yes,
Okay,
the pine tree flag, but I think it does have a name and I'm spacing it right now.
okay,
Caught off guard.
sorry. Yeah, it wasn't in your,
No, it wasn't.
Dan?
I'm afraid we're believing in the flag we have, because people don't realize how many hundreds of thousands of dollars it's gonna cost this state to change flags. I mean, again, fiscal service, like, it just. The amount of money, every school, how many main state flags are in your schools, every government office, every, there's gonna spend a lot of money to change flags.
Okay. All right, well, let's have closing statements, minute and a half. I think,
Gina, could I rephrase my question so that it worked for both?
okay,
Thank you.
why don't you, can you write it down, please, and give it to me so I can review it first? Give her some, oh, yes.
No. It's important to bring it out.
Well, the bottom line, no.
Okay, can we have some closing statements?
Sure,
Sharon,
sure.
what,
So, just in closing, my personal feeling, about a legislator is that there's a reason we have so many reps in the state house. And that is because our districts are smaller, and the importance is that we connect with our people. And as an educator, I am very used to communication, so I can make a promise to all 6 towns, not just Belgrade, not just Rome, but all 6 towns. That if you reach out to me with questions, I will answer. If you call me, email me, it doesn't matter. I will get back to you in a prompt manner. Because that is my job if I'm voted in.
thank you, and Dan?
Well, I mean, again, I've served for the last 4 years. I do get emails constantly. We have very few phone calls, believe it or not. Try to respond to every single one of them. If somebody's asking a question, I get a lot of emails that are just, I don't like this, statements. And then you get hundreds of those. But people who call me up, asking questions, concerns, also need help with a certain problem. We've taken care of a lot of those. Sometimes we go to the state and the state says, no, we can't do this, but we at least try for it. Basically, I've basically spent my whole life serving in one way or another. I started off in Boy Scouts all the way up to my time with the town and the time with the state, and I enjoyed public service. So basically, I am who I am. You get, I'm who you say. I kind of tell you the way it is, and I don't try to play games, and make people think I'm something I'm not, so. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, candidates. So we are gonna have the Senate candidates now. And while they switch seats, I'm just gonna mention that, the absentee ballots will be available 30 days before the election. You can request one either by visiting or by calling the town office. And actually, in the newsletter that's coming out from the town, there's a website that you can order them from. There's a secure drop box outside the town office. You can drop off your ballots. You can also mail in your ballot. In-person voting will be at the Center for All Citizens on Friday, November 5th, from 8 AM to 8 PM. And if you haven't registered to vote, you can do it at the town office before election day or at the polls on election day. Thank you. And now we have Ray and Rochelle
You can.
and Dick Bradstreet. I'm going to leave this pad of paper over here. If anybody would like to write down a question, that would be better, I think, than maybe just asking it outright. And put it over here on my desk tonight. We want to just say something, do some. We'll save some time, people writing out the question. Candidates. Please make sure your questions are directed to both candidates, and it should be about the position they're running for. If you can keep your question to be like within 15 seconds, okay, so we have plenty of time for the candidates to answer. Okay. So, we're gonna follow the same format. You each have a minute and a half to talk about yourselves, and then we're gonna ask questions. And I have some other questions that came through the, chat feature, and we'll ask some of those. Dick, can you start?
Okay, well, thank you very much. I'm Dick Bradstreet. I live in Vassalboro. I'm a father, grandfather, been married to my wife Joanne for 52 years. I have 3 adult children, one of whom is here in the audience tonight. I have another son who lives in Albion. I have a daughter who's in New Gloucester, who's actually represented from New Gloucester and sits beside me in the legislature. So that's been very, very good. I'm term limited in the House. I've served 8 terms. I've been on the Judiciary Committee. The last 3 terms, I've been on the Labor and Housing Committee. And was also selected to be on the Joint Select Committee on Housing this last year, and I'm the lead for both committees, which means I'm the ranking minority member. I think, I grew up in Central Maine. I've been here all my life except for 4 years when I went to New Hampshire and I graduated from Dartmouth. And I came back to Maine, worked for my wife's grandfather for 12 years, and then started my own business. My wife and I did. We sold modular and manufactured homes in Winslow. We were retailers. I've been involved in the manufacturing portion of it as well. During the last of the Great Recession, my wife and I decided, we're old enough, we kept waiting this out and the business never came back. So we decided to retire and collect Social Security. And we actually sold our property to the American Legion, which is now their state headquarters. I got convinced to run for the State House shortly after I retired and been successful. So hope I am one more time. Thank you.
Reagan?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Reagan LaRochelle. I'm currently the state representative for the west side of Augusta. I grew up in Augusta. I lived there with my 2 teenage boys who will be 17 on Thursday. So I also attended Coney High School where they currently are juniors. After Coney, I attended Bowdoin College and then went to the Yale School of Management where I received my Master's of Business Administration. After that, I moved back to the Augusta area. I now live in the home that I grew up in, next door to my parents. And in 2019, I ran for the Augusta City Council because I felt like I had some experience to contribute to the city that I grew up in. After that, the seat for state representative became available. in my district, and I was asked to run for that and won that in a special election in 2021. That timeframe's a little tight for me. I'm a small business owner. I own a small commercial cleaning business, and I'm also an economic development consultant. So I work with municipalities and developers on business programs in around the state.
Thank you. Okay, we'll start by asking you the first question, Reagan. Again, this is about property taxes, and let's just loop it in with the school funding for public schools. Could you please comment on the level of funding school districts receive from the state of Maine? And would you propose any initiatives regarding public schools? And in addition, what could you do, or what should the state be doing to address the rise in property taxes across the state?
Sure, that's a big question. I will try and answer it
That's a
all.
lot.
My children, as I said, are currently juniors at Coney High School. I have been very impressed with their public school education and with the teachers in those schools. We all know that in order to retain the teachers and the programs that we have available for students, we need to have adequate funding. I know that the Democrats pushed to reinstate the 55% share of funding from the state. And so now that is something that obviously affects your property taxes, because the state is fulfilling that obligation of the 55% school funding formula, excuse me. And when I first joined the legislature, I actually proposed a bill that the governor put into her budget and was passed to have a rainy day fund for this education funding, so that the state can continue to fulfill that obligation even in years where the budget is tight elsewhere. So that's something that helps with your property taxes. The Democrats have also worked hard to reinstate revenue sharing, which is another component of funding that comes from the state to municipalities and factors into your mill rate. So those are two things. That was a kind of a big question.
Yeah, okay, right. Why don't you take another minute, because I did join some questions together. Sorry about that.
Yeah, all right. So
Another minute
I'll
and a
try,
half, okay.
all right, I'll try and recess. So, and I think, everyone has felt property tax increases in the past years. That's what happens with inflation, with the cost of goods, even when our municipalities are trying to be responsible and mindful for their citizens. I know when I was on the city council, in Augusta, we made very hard decisions, trying to balance quality of life and services versus, people who are literally struggling to stay in their homes and be able to afford everything they needed to afford. We did talk about briefly the property tax stabilization program, which was repealed. That was a disaster. And it had bipartisan support actually in its repeal, and was replaced by the property tax fairness credit, which is a proven program that was expanded for seniors who actually needed it. The problem with the property tax stabilization program was that we had a lot of wealthy seniors that were taking advantage of it with this loophole, and it ended up costing the state a whole lot more money. So this is a new fix. A lot of people may not have seen that realized to the degree that we would want it to, because costs everywhere have gone up, which have resulted in our municipalities having to make hard decisions and increase property taxes. There's more that we can do, and we need to work incrementally to make that happen. I think that, we're poised to do that and make some recommendations going forward.
Okay, Dick, 3 minutes for both of
3
those
minutes,
things
okay.
about the school funding and property taxes.
Okay, I've been figuring it must be tough to be a school administrator or teacher nowadays, because every time we have a new legislature, there are more ideas coming out of Augusta. Maybe are good and maybe are not. Talking to a local superintendent not that long ago, he said, please don't give us any more mandates. You have no idea how much of our time and the monies it takes to just fulfill the requirements that you place on us from the state level. I said, I understand that. And then he offered to me, now, we may be talking about the paid family medical leave at some point in time tonight. And I know that's an act that was, put into law and, signed by the governor. But he said, you know, that one law is gonna cost our small community $55,000 a year the first year, and it's gonna go up from there. That's just one small example of what we do at the state level. I think the question is, what can we do at the state level to alleviate some of the pressure on the property taxes? One is, let's forget the mandates, the many mandates that we put on them. We have to be aware of that. Many of these are brought up during our discussions in committee, but they seem to be kind of pushed to the side a lot of the time. We also have to be careful of the social demands that we're placing on our teachers. It seems like the schools are doing a lot more now than just educating kids. I think it's been an obligation and duty on the part of parents. I know it's a whole new world out there, but at some point in time, I think we have to take a step back and look at what we're doing. We are already, according to who you listen to, about the fourth highest tax state in the country. And I don't see how we can go back to our taxpayers for more money right now. I say that especially in light of, we have falling test scores. And I think a good portion of that is because we do have placed so many mandates on our teachers, and they're, instead of teaching, they're fulfilling the requirements that they're forced to do. It may be a time to step back for the whole state and take another look at how we fund our schools. And I do agree that the state funding formula needs to be reviewed. It's very complicated. There'll be opposition to it, but I think it's something that needs to be done. It's time to have people who are deliberate over this and work together. This is something we really need to work together on, and I'm more than willing to do that. It's a big issue. I've got, I mentioned I have 2 children, 3 grandchildren. My 3 grandchildren, 3 children, all live in Maine. I want my grandchildren to live in Maine too. I want them to have a healthy environment. I want them to have a vibrant economic system, a business community that hires and pays good wages. We have to keep that in mind in everything that we do in Augusta. That's the key to a lot of what we do. If we have a stagnant economy, nobody wins. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. This is a question about unemployment benefits from one of the people on Zoom. This person said unemployment benefits can last 5 years and could reduce workforce participation and exacerbate staffing shortages. I don't know that those things are true, but I have heard those things. Is there a better way to get people over the hump and back into the workforce? Dick, do you want to start on this one?
Yes, I think there's workforce issues. No matter where you go, any part of the country, there are workforce issues. A couple years ago, my wife and I drove to Colorado to go to our grandson's wedding. And on the way, everywhere we stopped, help wanted, help wanted. It's the same back here. Having served on the Labor and Housing Committee, I am concerned about the unemployment benefits being a little bit too easy to attain. We've had several measures were proposed by a couple of legislators and they didn't go very far. We seem to have a lot of people, I'm not sure how they're surviving now without working, but they seem to be doing that. I think we've probably provided some disincentives to work. Maybe, we pay a lot of health care, we pay a lot of housing, we're providing a lot of food now. So I think there are some disincentives out there for people to get back to work. If I get to Augusta, if I'm chosen to be a senator and you go into a place and it looks like it's either they could use some more help there, you'll know there's someone in Augusta working to try to alleviate that. It's a big issue. We've got questions about we can talk about childcare, home health care, nurses in hospitals, shortages everywhere, housing industry. No matter how much we put into housing, if there aren't people to build them, we won't build the houses. Big issue. We need to take a close look at it. We need to be serious about it.
Reagan?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Okay, this is, I'll read it exactly as it was submitted. Unemployment benefits can last 5 years and likely this reduces workforce participation and exacerbates staffing shortages. Is there a better way to get people over the hump and back into the workforce?
It's interesting because I did have a conversation at a door, just this week, about the idea of unemployment and does it last too long? Is it too easy to get? And I think what we really need to focus on are some of the barriers that are preventing people from working. And some of the things that I've heard when Dick just mentioned is childcare. Another one is transportation, especially out in these rural areas. Cars are expensive, insurance is expensive. We have no public transportation. In Augusta, we don't even have taxis that operate after 5 p.m. Now, if you're trying to work and you have no way to get to your job, how do you possibly work? There's some real things that I think we need to look at in order to get people who really would want to work, because who can possibly survive on unemployment benefits, even in this economy? It is impossible. It's impossible to afford somewhere to live, food, if you have a child. It's just not an easy way of life. So let's look at some of those barriers that are across communities to help to get people to work. And certainly employers will appreciate that. And I'm sure that potential employees will too.
Just a follow-up to that, I mean, there's a lot in the news about the shortage of long-term care workers and nursing home workers. Is there something the state of Maine can do to alleviate this problem? You want to start with you, Reagan, on this one?
Sure, yeah, and I've also spoken to people who are homebound and rely on these home health care workers to come in. We don't have enough. There's a very high turnover rate. It's a very difficult job. It's a physical job, and it's an underpaid position. It's really there's a lot of things working against this, and especially with our older population and encouraging the idea of older adults to be able to stay in their homes. We really need to figure out this issue of being able to provide that support. I think reimbursement rates are low for these workers. And we actually had a very creative bill in my committee. I'm in the Innovation Development, Economic Advancement and Business, very long title, committee. And we did have a representative who came and was trying to discuss ways of maybe people who had retired early, who might be able to fill home health care roles with an incentive of having a credit for a child or grandchild to attend a four-year college in Maine. So just trying to think of incentives. And I think we do need to be creative like that. We do need to figure out how to supplement that workforce. Thank you.
Dick, comments on long-term care and nursing home shortages, workers for long-term care and nursing home shortages? What can the state of Maine do to help alleviate that shortage?
Well, it certainly is an issue. I've had relatives who've been in nursing homes, and the care is good, but you could see that the staff is tired, overworked. The only thing that's going to, I think, help us is some type of we need increased remuneration that they get, especially with the way inflation has gone lately. They get raises as soon disappeared as soon as they go to the store or fill their oil tank. That money's gone. So it's a big problem. I think, again, it gets back to the workforce issues. We need to incentivize people to go to work. I think there are some good ideas for like people who recently retired, do that. Perhaps give them some tax advantages, not taxing what they make while they're doing that. Credits and other ways for their family members. It's once again, there's no easy solution to a lot of these problems. We have to find people who will sit down and work together to figure them out. knowing that we have limited resources, and we have to be wise the way we spend those resources. We're not a rich state. We can't act like we're a rich state. We need to attract more people here, businesses here who will hire and pay well and provide some of those things that we really need. I hate to keep emphasizing that, but it's key for the state of Maine.
Okay, maybe at this point, you could comment on the housing crisis. Are there any things Maine can do to help ease the housing crisis and create more affordable housing? Dick, you want to
Okay,
start with that?
well, as I mentioned, I spent my whole adult life in the housing business. I provided affordable housing, and much of it, I don't think I ever saw hardly anything that was subsidized. What we do in the state of Maine, we're short on all types of housing, not just affordable housing, short on rental housing, we're short on high-end housing. We need to create a supply of housing to get the dynamics in action. What happens when somebody buys a home? The other people move out, somebody moves in where they were before, somebody moves in there, and it creates a whole dynamic. But if we don't have that additional supply, that dynamic can't work. One thing we've done in the state of Maine, which I think we need to promote home ownership. We need to concentrate more on home ownership rather than reimbursing people for rents. That is the way they build personal wealth. It's a good way, it's probably the best way to increase the equity in their property, to increase their ability to have a good life in Maine. We need expedited and simplified permitting process. We need to look at the manufactured type of housing. We need to look at automated types of housing. We do have a workforce shortage. One advantage we do have is that when in the offsite construction, you don't need as many tradespeople, but you do need tradespeople, and we need to put more money in training for the trades. It's essential if we're going to get out of this rut.
Megan?
Yes, and Dick truly summarized the housing issue well. This isn't just about people who are unhoused, literally living on the street. It's at every level. It's the young family that's looking to buy their starter home. It's the people who are living in apartments and can't afford for their rent to go up even $25 at this point. And it's employers who can't retain workers from away because we don't have adequate housing for them to live in. So this is a problem from the bottom to the top. My own son told me the other day that when he graduates from college, he's going to have to move back in with me because he's not going to be able to afford anywhere to live. And for our kids, I know, I said, oh my God, but I'll do it. But for our kids to have that realization at this point, just makes it seem really stark. One thing for me that I think we need to focus on, two things really, is we have a large number of veterans in Maine and we have a large number of older people. So this problem is going to have to be approached from many different angles. I think two angles are to incentivize housing for veterans and for homeownership for veterans, which we do have programs for, but to kind of boost those even more. And also the idea of having affordable housing for seniors that they can transition into in their communities, because we have people, that's my time, we have people who are living in 3 and 4 bedroom homes because they don't have anywhere else to transition into their communities. And I think that's an important thing for them to do.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Maybe we could go longer on this.
There we go.
Want to write a question down? Would you like to ask your daycare question to these folks?
Sure, sure. I'm just curious, as someone who wants to live in Maine and moved here from New Hampshire, both taking jobs a job in Maine, but we couldn't find childcare. And I'm curious what you guys would propose doing to beef up that system and help support the economy and workforce reentry.
I don't know who starts, Gina.
Who just finished? You did,
Me.
right? Yeah, you can start.
Okay, no, that's a great question. I know I spoke to your husband at the door a few weeks ago and he did raise that issue of childcare as a concern. I'll tell you, when I got divorced, I had twin 1.5-year-old boys, and I did not have childcare for them, and I had been on a waiting list for quite a while. It took 4 months, 2 slots at the YMCA opened up, which was phenomenal childcare for me, and then I was able to go to work and get a job. My sister had a similar situation. She lives in Cumberland. She works for the state, and she could not find childcare in Cumberland for her 4-year-old and 7-year-old. They had to hire a college kid to last them through the summer. And then they were able to get into a daycare program that, she has to run back and forth, and work around the schedule of the daycare so that she can work. So it is a real issue for working parents. I would say that one thing that we need to increase the number of daycare slots. Plain and simple. I know that we have businesses that are working with public-private partnerships to actually open daycares for their employees. I think we need to, look to incentivize that more. I know the hospital did that, and there are other businesses that have the capacity to do that. And then also, again, just working with our small home-based daycares, helping to remove barriers for them to be able to have childcare responsibilities in the community.
Dick?
Yeah, I don't disagree with much of that at all. It's a different world out there. When my kids were little, family members were able to help take care. Probably that doesn't exist as much anymore. We talked about some of those ideas that Reagan had. There's one other thing I'd like to touch on is that's what I've heard from childcare providers. And they say some of the requirements that the state places on them is so onerous that they just can't do it affordably. There are the staffing levels, the safety issues that they think are over the top. And I understand that safety is the primary concern when you're taking care of children, especially someone else's children, I would say. But I think there has to be reasonableness there somewhere that we seem to be always grasping for, but never seem to be able to reach. So I think we need to take a look at that. I would bring childcare providers in and have them design a plan, rather than have it top down. I think it always works better that way. You talk to people who are actually out there in the field and doing the work on a day-to-day basis, what they need and how we can help them. Because if we can help them, they can help you. And that's, I think, a combination of things that need to happen for that to be available for people like yourself.
May I make one suggestion? Our previous daycare provider told us that when her staff lost main care due to COVID ending, COVID restrictions ending, she lost a lot of staff because they no longer had health insurance and they had their own children they needed to provide for. So, maybe providing access to main care for those lower paid workers, even if they wouldn't qualify based on their income. Like, health insurance is so valuable and could really help our community.
Great suggestion.
Okay, Dick, this is about reproductive rights. Would you make any changes to Maine's reproductive rights laws?
Okay, first of all, I will tell people that I'm pro-life, and I'm not afraid to say that. And I will go over, we're talking about essentially LD 1619 that was heard in the legislature. And I'll try to give pretty much the speech that I gave when I spoke against it. And I said, I'm pro-life. I know that probably most people in this room don't agree with me on that because I'm kind of strongly pro-life. But Mainers, the majority probably don't agree with me either. But they don't agree with this bill either, because this bill was extreme. It was extreme. Even the media at the time said it's one of the most extreme in the country. So I said, it doesn't reflect Maine's moderate values, which I don't think it does. In the current law we have, I think it's too extreme, and Mainers aren't extremists. I would like to see some type of effort. I think if it's anything that's going to be done to put us back to what we had before, I think like Representative Newman mentioned, that's a reasonable thing. I'm a pragmatist, I'm a realist. I also think this is in some ways, this is being used as a divisive issue, which is too bad because it's important to a lot of people. But there are things that are also important too, like our economy, like the inflation that we have, like the unaffordability of everything that we want nowadays. So I think that we need to be careful about this. I think that's the essence of my speech that I gave in the House. Thank you.
Reagan?
Thank you, and I'll say, I agree with Dick, this is a very emotional issue for some people. And it brought out a lot of emotion last session, and I heard from many people on both sides of this topic. And I want to say that, you know, everyone looks at this through a lens. My lens is through as a woman, a mother, and a lawmaker. And, you know, and you talked about reproductive health. I think we zoomed in on abortion specifically, but, you know, there's a lot to making sure that children and mothers are well cared for. And I want to be clear that I believe that this is a medical decision. And the law that we passed last session, I actually think, Gina, that whatever was on the secretary's or whatever website you got was not quite accurate, because essentially what the
Attorney
law.
General's website.
Right, so that
Okay.
needs to be updated, but essentially what the law is now is that the decision is between the woman and their doctor. And I think that that's where that belongs. There's no room for politicians when we're talking about medical decisions. And there is no way that a legislature can predict the type of circumstances that a doctor and a woman will fall into in time to keep that woman safe. So I support the legislation that's on the books at this time, and my time is up.
Well, I apologize for that. I had seen some statistic that most people don't even know what their state's laws are regarding reproductive rights, and I thought, well.
I think
look that
what
up.
you read was the one that was before the one that was passed.
Right.
Well, thank you for pointing that out. Okay, so both of you have served in the House. What issues have you supported or opposed while in the legislature? And what would you like to do should you become a state senator? Reagan, do you want to start with that?
Sure. You know, the issues that did you say supportive or opposed? Supportive?
Both, support or oppose, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, the issues that are important to me are affordable housing, business development, working families, education, natural resources, veterans and seniors, mental health and substance use. And in preparation for this, I was looking at, you know, bills I have sponsored and co-sponsored, and I've hit every single one of those topics in bills that I have sponsored or co-sponsored in the past 3 years. So, you know, I will continue working on those issues. Those are issues that are important to me and my family, and my children and the people who raised me in my community. You know, issues that I would oppose would be ones that affected people's civil rights, would kind of reduce quality of education, roll back protections on natural resources. You know, I think, you know, that those their LGBTQ is something that's important to me in keeping our kids safe and healthy mentally. So those are things that I will continue to support if I'm reelected or elected to the Senate, and continue working on those issues.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Well, you know, I think Representative Newman alluded to this when he spoke earlier about how we don't have plenty of bills sometimes to say that we pass. I did get a couple passed, but I think what I'd like to work on is workforce development. I think that's vital to our economy and our well-being as a state. There's one other thing I'd like to talk about, which is nobody ever talks about, and I think it's something that we should keep in mind. It's a big ask, but right now our state seems to be run by Southern Maine. There's not a whole lot of compromise going on. And I think one part of that reason is because you know, the smaller communities really aren't represented. They're well represented, but they have to bow to the wishes of the leadership, which comes from Southern Maine. And I'm wondering why our Senate isn't divided, for instance, according to counties. and have two from each county, that would, kind of counterbalance the demands that come from southern Maine. If you're in the legislature, you can see that it does happen. So we call for constitutional change. I know that probably doesn't have much hope because the people in southern Maine would have to go for it, and they like having the power that they have now. But there really aren't two Maines. It's gonna be tough to do anything other than what I just suggested to address that.
Okay, thank you. And let's just ask about gun rights and safety. What should Maine be doing, if anything, to prevent gun violence? And you give us your views on whether or not Maine should adopt a red flag law. Dick?
Yes, because this is all in light of what happened in Lewiston almost a year ago, a terrible tragedy, and again, it's an emotional thing. I would urge people to look at the report that was given to the governor's office by the commission that was charged with investigating what happened there. I have read how it's 212 pages. It's quite a long read, but it is, I think it's telling. Once again, when that crime was committed, it would have been committed regardless of what laws are on the books regarding guns, because if somebody's a criminal, it's gonna find a gun and use it in a nefarious way. The issue, and it was spoken to before, is mental health. We need to up our mental health concentration on those people who are in the situations such as Mr. Card was in. It should be a priority for our state. I do not support a red flag law. I think if the yellow flag law that we currently have on the books were followed, it would not have happened. However, it was the first time the yellow flag law was new, and nobody knew quite how to act under that law, how to implement it. But if we now know, I think a lot better, learning the hard way of what needs to be done when we find ourselves in a situation like that. One thing we have to keep in mind is if we pass a law, it doesn't do anything to pass a law. It's going to be found unconstitutional. It's actually counterproductive to what we're trying to do.
Yes, and again, as Dick mentioned, this is another one of these topics that is very emotional, and some people have big reactions about, and something that I heard as we had the gun bills coming forth, heard from people on both sides, and that's always very helpful. I also respect the rights of responsible gun owners, and when I'm looking at a piece of legislation that involves guns, I'm looking at it through a lens of whether or not this bill is going to save someone's life. And that could be whether it's from a suicide, an act of domestic violence that includes a gun, or a mass shooting. And I think that's something that we have to keep in mind. In terms of a red flag law, it's always very hard, the devil is in the details. So it's hard to say what exactly I would support if a red flag law were proposed. However, I would say that if someone is having a severe mental health crisis, I would much rather them have a can of baseballs or a bat or a knife than a semi-automatic weapon. So, we're talking about saving lives here. And I think that's important to consider in the wake of that tragedy and all the other ones that we've had around the country and continue to have.
Okay, this is something you didn't get a question on, but what was your first job? Yeah.
My first job, I grew up on a potato farm, so I had my work all cut out for me. When I woke up in
Did
the
you say
morning.
dairy farm?
Potato farm.
Potato farm.
Potato farm, yes. But anyway, other than that, I worked summers for a local grocery store. I worked for Lee Brothers Construction 2 summers in Waterville, doing the Spring Street connector. Remember that very well. Taught me a good work ethic to get up in the morning, to be on time, to work hard, and be thankful that I had a job. One of the things that I did, probably should have mentioned before too, I think we have to find a way to get our younger people more involved in the workplace. We offered a couple of bills to do that, to ease off on the wage that would be required for someone who is maybe 15 or 16 years old and not have to pay them a full state minimum wage, because we had a number of employers say, I'd hire some kid, but I can't pay him more than what he's gonna provide for me. I just can't afford to do that. And we were turned down. I think that's too bad. I think we need to take a look at that again. So my first job was construction, I guess you could say.
Reagan?
Yeah, it depends on how far back we go. I mean,
Well, you know, whatever you want to admit to.
no, I guess, my first job was in high school when I worked as a playground supervisor in Augusta. We had public playgrounds and pools, and so I was in charge of kids from 8 to 5 and putting on activities for them to do during the day. I was also a waitress. When I graduated from college, though, my first job was as an AmeriCorps Vista volunteer in West Philadelphia. I worked actually in the home of the American Bandstand, if any of you are familiar with that show. Where Dick Clark was, that was pretty cool. We had that history, but it was a minority business development center, and I worked in a youth program teaching kids how to write business plans as a means to encourage them to pursue higher education. So that was my first real job, I guess.
Okay, great. Well, how about some closing statements, minute and a half? Reagan, we'll start with you.
Sure. So I want to thank you for coming out tonight, and for the people who are on Zoom, and also for the moderators. I've put these forums on before myself, and so we want to thank the town of Belgrade for allowing us to come out and be heard. I'm looking to get elected to the Senate so that I can continue the work that I've started in the House. I think we're on a good path, and this is incremental work that we're doing. The reason that I run for office is to make this a place where my kids will be able to have a job and be able to afford a place to live, and be near me. So to do that, I'm there representing people who are important to me, people who helped to raise me, people who are in marginalized communities and need a voice at the state level. And so that's what I'm looking to do. Thank you.
Dick?
Well, thank you also for putting this on tonight. It's been kind of enjoyable, actually.
Oh, good.
So appreciate that. Anyway, I think I have the temperament to be a good senator in the state of Maine. Currently, if you ask somebody on either side of the aisle in the House how I act, they say, well, I'm very respectful and I'm very thoughtful, courteous, and most of all, what I'm concerned about is maintaining my credibility. Because when somebody asks me something in the street, I want to give the same answer I'd give if I was sitting in the State House. I've been chosen to be leads on 2 different committees. That doesn't usually happen. Evidently, some other people think I have qualities that are appropriate enough to do that, to try to keep everybody together. I do have, I've worked with the public for a long time. I respect the public. As a Christian, I think everybody has innate worth in the eyes of God. I respect everybody. I believe in defending their rights. I believe they're important, and I believe they're worth listening to. I've been told by a few people that how can you sit there and listen to those people say the same thing over and over? They said they came here and they want to be heard, and that's my job. I'm here to listen to them. So I think I would appreciate your vote when the time comes. I'll try to earn it. I'd be honored to have that vote on November 5th. And I thank you once again for hosting this.
Thank you, candidates. A recording of the forum will be available on the town's Facebook page and YouTube channel and on the town's website, right? Okay. Thanks so much to all our candidates for participating. It's really given us a chance to get to know everyone better. And we appreciate your willingness to run for office. So have a good evening and good luck with the election. Thank you.